Hi, welcome back to LaidOPEN Podcast. I'm Charna Cassell, and today's episode is going to be a little different. Joseph Kramer, who's a friend of mine, is going to be interviewing me and asking some basic questions about my work life and how I ended up on this path. I've had a lot of strangers, people reach out to me and ask me when they're thinking about making a career change or wanting to pursue something similar to what I'm up to. They want to know more information and how they can go about making those changes. So here's a little bit about me, and I hope it's useful. Today, I have with me Joseph Kramer, who is a friend and a colleague, and we're going to do something a little different today. So first of all, welcome, Joseph.
Learn how to live embodied. Your life is about to unwind. Uncover new tools and start healing. Leave trauma and tension behind. Isn't it great, laid open? Let all your desires come true. How can you live laid open? Imagine yourself brand new. Imagine yourself brand new.
So good to see you.
Hello, Charna.
He's going to be interviewing me today. And the reason that I asked Joseph to come on and interview me, first, this interview is focused on giving some information for strangers who DM me, listeners, and clients who ask me questions about how I came to do what I do. And they may want to make their own career change, whether that's being a psychotherapist or working in the field of sexuality. And so I wanted all the information to be in one place. And specifically, I think of Joseph as someone who is an elder, a teacher, a respected human, and someone who holds a lot of history. And I love our conversations. So that is why I've asked him to interview me.
I was thinking, Charna, how we met. I remember several years ago, Annie Sprinkle and Beth Stevens had an eco-sexual event where sexologists and people knowledgeable about sex gave information about connecting to nature and about sex. And I was at this table giving information, and right next to me was you. We got to know each other. And I heard the information you were giving people, and I go, wow, this one's a professional. She really knows how to do it. I do. I remember for the listeners, we were actually in a very famous place in San Francisco, right outside City Lights Books, which is the first paperback bookstore in the United States. Now the books are moving out of the consciousness, but that was the first place. And we were in the alley right behind it. It was really a wonderful meeting. And what I liked when I met you was that you're a psychotherapist who knows about sex, whose specialty is sex. And I'm a sexologist. I'm a sex educator. So we had that foundation. That was our beginning.
I remember. So first of all, I was excited that I was like, oh, that's Joseph Kramer. Like I knew who you were. And so I was very flattered when you were praising the advice that I was giving people, right? I heard you talk to another person who had come to talk to you, and you were like, you gotta, talk to this one over here. And something that stood out to me was that specifically, I think I was talking about trauma. And you were like, oh, you had some opinions about trauma and how it was being talked about in the field. And then the way that I was approaching it shifted something for you. I have the vague, broad brushstroke memory of that.
I think that's true. I think the other thing is, as a sex educator, a professional, I refer people to other people a lot. And I, I had, it's really difficult to find, unfortunately, to find psychotherapists who are really knowledgeable and comfortable dealing with sexual problems that people may be having, where sex is part of it. And we both happen to live in Oakland, California. So I go, wow, I found someone who's knowledgeable about sex, a psychotherapist. So how did you become, I'm interested in how a nice girl like you as a psychotherapist became an expert in sex also. How are you a sex educator and a sex therapist? How did that come about?
Well, I have to say, some of the latest training that I did was as a psychotherapist. So I was a sex educator and a certified master somatic coach through the Strozzi Institute before I ever became a licensed psychotherapist. So ever since high school, I was very interested in sex and sexuality because of trauma, my own child sexual abuse, and understand my own relationship to sex and sexuality. I came out when I was 15. I identified as a lesbian for a long time and didn't start dating men until my late 20s. When I was 24, I started working at Good Vibrations. So I was already doing sex education before then. I taught at a Wellesley summer program right out of college. And I remember leading a group, and this was like the beginning of, I don't know what was happening with the internet at that point, but it was already pretty impressive to me, the kinds of education information that these young people, these 14, 15, 16-year-olds had. But anyways, fast forward, I worked at Good Vibrations, a worker-owned sex toy store. It used to be a co-op. So when I worked there, it was a co-op, which means it was worker-owned. And through working there was also a woman who had worked there, Stacey Haynes, before I was ever there. And she had a book, The Survivor's Guide to Sex. And so this was a book that's about healing sexual trauma and reclaiming your body and your sexuality. So it's a sex positive approach to healing from sexual trauma versus Courage to Heal was not seen as that, even though that's also a really useful book written by Laura Davis back in the day. So working at Good Vibrations, I was simultaneously in a group as well as working individually with Stacey. So I was doing that training with her or working just in her private practice. She was a somatic coach, and I didn't know what that was yet, right? I'd been in therapy from the age of 14 on. So I knew what therapy was, kind of, like I didn't know all the distinctions. And I was also working at Good Vibrations, which I called Boundary Boot Camp because there would be boundary crossings that happened at work, and I would get to practice the things that the embodied boundary practices that Stacey was teaching us while I was at work 8 hours a day, right? So when Stacey left her work, she ended up leaving her private practice and going and teaching at Strozzi full time. I followed her. I didn't know what the Strozzi Institute was. I didn't know what embodied leadership was, but I followed her there. But your question, you specifically were asking, how did I, a nice Jewish girl, become focused around sex and sexuality? So yeah, I wanted to heal my own relationship to sex and understand why I was so terrified all the time. And thank the Lord for somatic work, because it shifted my nervous system in a way that talk therapy never did. Talk therapy offered me a lot of really great awareness. I could analyze anything and everyone starting at 14 years old, but you know what I mean? Like I really understood the psyche in certain ways that young people don't always, or adults don't always, unless they've been exposed to concepts. But my nervous system didn't change. My level of chronic anxiety didn't change. My safety in my body and with others in relationship didn't change until I started doing somatic practices. So I can't really separate those two things. It's like an interest in sex and sexuality pre-existed somatic work for me, but it was the wires for excitement and anxiety were crossed, and I had a sexual aversion, even though I was understanding things from an intellectual place. Like I was reading Carol Queen's book, Exhibitionism for the Shy and Real Life Nude Girl, before I was ever living in San Francisco and meeting her and working with her at Good Vibrations, right? In college, I was reading her stuff.
So this gives me a beginning. So you weren't studying psychotherapy yet. You were in psychotherapy because you somehow ended up Good Vibrations stores, or several, were places that gave information to people. People knew if they went there, they could talk about sex and get the products or just help. They had classes and all kinds of things. They were centers, actually, the stores. So that was the sex education. And then you got hooked up with Strozzi Institute. And of course, this is the body.
And so before we talk about Strozzi, I do want to say something about Good Vibrations, which is important, which is they offered extensive training. It wasn't like you were just getting people dildos and vibrators, right? But we had a lot of educational classes that we were required to take. We were required to know the material and the products. So not just get free toys, but to read the books and to watch educational videos. And so, the most satisfying part of that job for me was educating people, like educating women and introducing them to how large their clitoris actually is, or teaching an 80-year-old woman how to, a man, her partner to find her G-spot and how to help her have her first orgasm. Like that was the sweetest thing, But because of my background in my own psychotherapy and psychology and understanding, and also working with Stacey and having more understanding of sexual trauma, I was bringing that to the clientele, to the people that were coming in to buy products. I was talking to people all day, and I was inevitably going to talk about sexual trauma. So I just want to acknowledge Good Vibrations for, back in the day, it was SFSI, the San Francisco sex education line. And there was Good Vibrations, right? Those were two places where you get a lot of really solid, not shaming sex information.
And this is really before it was on the internet or elsewhere. You had to go out and get it. You had to go out and get it, yes.
Yeah. You would, rent Nina Hartley's guide to blank, whatever educational video, Nina Hartley being a porn star that started making a bunch of educational videos, or Joseph Kramer and Annie Sprinkle's Fire in the Valley, Fire in the Mountain. And then there was Strozzi. You started to ask me.
Yeah. Well, I know I've taken classes with Stacey, your guide, not extensively, but it was the most well-known and early body-based approach that if anything's going to happen, you have to bring your body along. It deals with the body. That was their idea. Somatics is, when I first saw a psychotherapist, I would say most of it was from the neck up.
Right.
You're talking about things and how you are in your body and how you're feeling. And you mentioned things like your nervous system was out of kilter, and that all happens. But we're talking about psychotherapy was about, why, how did this come about, and what can you do about it? And the wonderful thing in psychotherapy over the last 20 years is most psychotherapy, there's a corrective. And I think the whole profession understood, wait, the body needs to be involved in this And so more and more, I would say the majority of psychotherapists now would call themselves somatic psychotherapists if they include the body.
Mm-hmm.
And being aware of the body, mindfulness is a big deal. And you represent that. I still think there is not enough comfort about sex, even though sex is about the body. Most psychotherapists, where I hear it is people say, I go to psychotherapy, but I'm embarrassed to talk to my psychotherapist. I don't want to tell my psychotherapist something about masturbation. I don't want to tell my psychotherapist. And I go, what? You're paying somebody, you've been going to them for months, and you have this difficulty, but you're embarrassed to tell them. And this is quite common even today. It's
one of the things that was really appalling to me when I went to school to become a psychotherapist. I did it reluctantly. I did it. It wasn't something that I've known people who've been harmed by therapists, haven't had positive experiences. I had a very beloved therapist as a teenager, but I didn't like the representations of therapists out there in the media, and I didn't want to be in that role. And I felt like so I went to grad school to become a psychotherapist because I was told, if you're wanting to work with teenagers, you're wanting to work with sexuality, you're wanting to work with the body, it's probably good for you to have a license.
Mhm.
So I went, and actually it was a very uninspiring experience. I read everything that was assigned besides like this one class that I found incredibly boring. But I thoroughly engaged with the material and enjoyed it to a certain extent, but really nothing touched working with Richard Heckler and Stacey Haynes in their embodiment, as well as the practices that felt irreplaceable. But one of the things that really frustrated me going to school for psychotherapy was, I think I can't remember if it was 16 or 12 hours of sexuality training. And in that training, and ironically, it was taught by Jack Morin, and I really liked his books. He wrote The Erotic Mind, which I think is a very useful application of Freud's repetition compulsion, the notion that you take something that's a childhood wound and you're unconsciously playing it out again and again to hopefully have a different resolution. And he related that to erotic life. And I thought that was a great book. And I enjoyed doing our paper, but he was then like just talking to people about basic anatomy versus all the things that are really important to be able to talk about when you are doing, therapy with a couple. So to what you were saying, I think that's very true. That it should be part of your basic training. And unfortunately, I was like, oh my God, I got so much more out of my Good Vibrations training. But granted, that was every day, 8 hours for years that I was talking about sex. So there was a desensitization and a comfort and an ease, as well as an enthusiasm that I brought to that topic.
And the people who came in to that store were all just such a diversity in San Francisco, different nationalities and different ages, as you said, 80 or 18, different male, female, all different types of queer, all different types of straight, everything so it's a little different than what 18 hours in the classroom with Jack Morin. Yes. Quite an education.
Yeah, I was very frustrated with that. And also on the same note, there was no trauma training, not a single. You could do an elective, like a separate thing that might be offered if you're lucky. But so the things that I received training in outside of being a psychotherapist, all the things that I really specialize in working with were not things that I got trained in as a psychotherapist. Everything that is the way that I talk about being a psychotherapist is, if you were to look at a beautiful mosaic, like a mural made of tiles, and all of the tiles are my somatics training, my trauma training, my energy medicine training, like everything that I've done outside of psychotherapy school. And the grout is my psychotherapeutic training, which is basically they give you enough information to take a licensing exam. They're teaching very basic things. And most often what people do is they go to school for psychotherapy and then they branch out and do a bunch of other trainings to figure out what their specialty is or what their niche is. And I kind of did it backwards, right? So I was already a master somatic coach from the Strozzi Institute, and I already had a private practice seeing clients. And then I went and I was simultaneously in school to get trained as a psychotherapist. And I was always fielding the question, so why are you here? Why are you doing this?
Well, I have to say, I'm glad for the grout.
Yes,
To weave
me
all
too.
that, it brings everything together. I know for the last year, you've been intensely focused on bringing not just the grout, but a lot of this other information together into an offering beyond one-on-one talking. I want to say something about that, about your online course.
So the course is called Pathways to Peace, Mindful Practices for Transformative and Vibrant Living. And it's actually, I wrote a very big course, right? A 12 module course. And this is only 2 modules from that, but it's turned into a daily practice. You get sent a video, it's a daily practice. And each week there's a video call. So for you to be in community and to get your questions answered. And I wanted it for people who are out there. I have a lot of listeners to my podcast, LaidOPEN Podcast, which you're listening to now, all over the world, in countries that never cease to amaze me. I'm like, wow, I'm amazed that these people are listening to this podcast in English. Like, I'm just really impressed by people's interest. And so I wanted to have resources that are available outside of the Bay Area to the elite, right? People who can afford to do somatic therapy in person or on video. I wanted to have a more affordable option out there. And I've been working on a book off and on. And so it's the same idea. It's just like, how can there be resources available around the world? This course is an opportunity for people to get introduced to this material, but as well as for clients or for people who are already doing it to have recorded material at home so that it's like they don't have to take copious notes. They don't have to ask me. Some people come see me, they come back 5 years later. I have different tools. It's like they have videos to refer to. It has stuff that's focused around kind of the core principles that time and time I see are really important foundational pieces of information for people who are wanting to literally transform how they think about themselves and how they experience their bodies and the world. So some somatic practices, parts work, right? Some people call it internal family systems, but before I ever knew about internal family systems, I was doing parts work in my own therapy, right? When you're working with trauma or when you're being a human, when you're in a human experience, you have conflicting parts inside of you that feel different things, and learning how to accept those parts and listen to those parts is a huge part of healing. Really, it's like, so parts work, regulation, working with the nervous system, guided meditations. There's a bunch of stuff in there. And the thing that I have felt very validated by, what's that?
I'm just laughing. There's a bunch of stuff in there.
There's a bunch of stuff in there. I feel like I don't know.
What I like about this, thank you for showing it to me, for giving me access.
Yeah.
Is, so I'm a sex educator, and people come and think, oh, that's interesting. They learn something and they think they know it. Mm-hmm. But to have sex or to change really involves practice. People need to practice something. They don't just change like this. Flipping to a website through Google doesn't mean you know something.
Yeah.
And what I like about your course is it's a practice-based course. There's videos, and the videos are short. Some are 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and putting forth something. And then here's a practice for this week that you can do. And you can meet, you have your meetings about it, but the practice is crucial. And people who don't practice don't change. You get to do it yourself. This is your choice. And that's the beauty. You don't do this for people. You're offering them practice. And this is my work too. That's another way we have in common. And the people who practice go, wow, so something's really changed. I teach touch. I ran a massage school for a while of teaching professional massage therapists. And people don't just come in and do one time on the back and they've got it down how to work the back. Boy, if you go to a massage therapist, you want somebody who's really good. They have to be practiced. And what we don't know, what the whole culture doesn't know, is that practice is how we grow and change. And all the helping professions should be helping our practice and to discern the practice. And that's what you're doing in this course and in therapy, I think. I've gone to therapy too in the old days where once a week you go and, okay, you deal with this. Then you go out and nothing happens for a week and then you go back. No, now it's try this, do this. I think, yes, practice is how people learn to enjoy. I think that's it. The practice is, that's it. So I think it's a practice-based course. That's why I laughed. I thought you said there's a lot of stuff in it.
Well, just regarding that, I have wanted to figure out what can I do when I see a client once a week, right? And it's like that space in between and trying, you offer positive leverage, negative leverage. How do you create accountability? Trying to help people practice and commit to practice. And we come into this world with different levels of internal structure that helps us commit to practice, right? Different levels of what some people call discipline, and different survival strategies. And so that's a big piece of it is depending on how your nervous system responds to stress, practice is going to be easier or harder for you. And so this course is very much about unpacking the belief systems that shape us, but also a lot of self-acceptance of not just how we are in the world, but how we respond to stress. So it's like helping us see ourselves, but also really start to do some practices that don't have to have us feel defeated by our automatic responses, but really provide a new way. But it's key. I am not going to heal anybody. People have to do their own practice, but I'm more than happy to cheerlead and offer support and resources.
And permission.
Yes.
Permission, I think. You're constantly go out, do this. Yes, try that. Giving information and permission.
Yeah. And one of the things about that is I believe that a team of support is valuable, right? It's not just going to be like one practitioner. I love referring people to other people for that reason. That's one of the reasons I like doing my podcast is bringing resources, bringing people that I think are gifts to the world and that have, healed themselves in a variety of ways, into the public view and to have other people have access and know who they are. And then additionally, community. Back to the Strozzi Institute, the work I did with Richard Strozzi Heckler and Stacey Haynes is essential for how I was transformed and discovered safety inside my own physical body. Richard uses martial arts-based practices. He's an Aikido master. He was a Marine. In Search of the Warrior Spirit is a great book for people to read. Anatomy of Change is a great book for people to read that he's written. And I left my first 8-month training. So the trainings are very different than they once were. One course was 3 days long for 8 months. And I did courses like that for 5 years. And in that time, I started my work at Strozzi feeling very skeptical of Richard because he was a man, simply because he was in a male body. I felt so unsafe around him. And I left feeling so much deep love and gratitude. I actually learned what gratitude was from my feelings towards Richard and Stacey. And it was like a mystery to me. I'm like, why do I feel happy and loving, but there are tears streaming down my face? What is that? And my therapist, Denise Benson at the time, was like, that's called gratitude.
I remember in your course saying, oh, this is from the Strozzi, this is the influence of the Strozzi Institute, because you invite people to be grounded. Grounded in Strozzi means you're here in the present moment. So you're not concerned about the past or the future. And there's even practices you suggest to be right in the present moment. And of course, this is I'm glad a lot of the culture is trying to get people back to the present moment, because our attention is pulled into everywhere else, into our phones and into the internet, all this. But that's part of what you're doing. I go, that's from the Strozzi Institute.
Yes.
Or
yes.
Part of it is.
Well, and there's many different sources that teach the same thing. What I've found over the years, having a teacher, I did a program with a man, Brother Ishmael Tete, who is a mystic from Ghana, and then reading a book that focuses on the Ho'oponopono prayer, and seeing the similar language, 2 places, one place in Hawaii and one place in, Ghana, and teachings that came to Brother Ishmael from the land itself that he transmitted, and the language being so similar to the Ho'oponopono prayer, and them not knowing about one another. It speaks to that there are some universal truths, right? There's value in the collective unconscious. And so there are things that that Richard invented, and there are things that are just, you know what I mean? Like their somatic work pre-existed him. And yes. I would take all the money in the world and bet it on the practices that I learned at the Strozzi Institute. So I am indebted to them for teaching me practices that I think, Stacey, when I was working with her in private practice, she would say, you can learn, like the work you can do in 2 years in this work is something that would take 20 years in psychotherapy.
Yes.
And I don't even know if 20 years of psychotherapy would still do it, because if you're not addressing the nervous system in a mindful way, I watch people just spin in loops versus I stand them up and do a physical practice, or I do body work, because those are different things that the Strozzi Institute taught is hands-on body work, physical partner-based practices. And then a huge part of my training also was through what's now called generative somatics. They used to be called somatics and trauma, with Denise Benson and Stacey Haynes. And that was looking at, she took the Strozzi Institute's work and applied it to trauma versus leadership, right? So embodied leadership is what Richard focused on, like how to make more humane leaders in corporations and leaders in the world. And then Stacey took it and applied it to working with trauma and social justice. And so, looking at systems, looking not just at the individual family unit, but looking at, ancestral trauma, looking at society, looking at culture, like all the systems of power that are around us that we're responding to all the time, that influence and physically shape us, as Richard would say, we have a somatic shape that is a result of our personal history, our belief systems, and how we believe we need to be safe in the world, or how we need to shape ourselves in order to connect.
Well, you've got quite a diverse history of education that you bring to the present moment. I have a question.
Yeah.
And this is a question I ask people in classes, and I ask people after a session that maybe I do hands-on session with somebody. And so I'm going to ask you, recently in your life, in your education, in your work, what surprises you? Are there some surprises that come up? Wow.
This was an unfortunate surprise, I guess. I mean, it's not a surprise. It's just, early on in my practice, when my fee was very low and, I was saying yes to everyone, I hadn't learned how to be completely discerning about who I was interested in working with. Like I would, even in an interview process, I was just saying yes to everybody. And I was very committed to being of service, also getting my hours. As a psychotherapist, you do 3,000 hours of training. And so the people that would come in would sometimes be abusive, like you're sitting in, maybe you're getting paid, but you could be sitting in a situation where if you're overly committed to being of service, I like to say, I've allowed the person to take a shit on my face. And it doesn't feel good. It's like, what do you have to do in your own body? Are you twisting yourself into a balloon animal in order to stay in the room? And you're just taking everything that's coming at you. You're actually not being of service when you allow people to cross your boundaries. So that was years of practice that took to know, okay, even in a first conversation with a potential client, do I want to work with them? Am I the right fit for them? And I'm at the point where I just ask my body. When people want to refer people, I ask my body if it's going to be the right fit. And if I don't get a yes, then I don't even have that conversation with the person. And there are times when I have somebody come in and it might be a really hard dynamic, but I get a nugget of gold from it, because that was like, oh, that was what I was meant to get, right? So fast forward to the surprise. I haven't had a client in my office, because I also work from home now, right? So people are in my personal space in a way, right? It's separate, but in my home. That hasn't felt really good in a long time.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And yeah, I remember when I always had at least one client who took almost all of my supervision time, because it just like wrung the life out of me, and I was overworking. And I've learned how to not do that. I've learned how to hand people's lives back to them and not feel overly responsible, although I'm susceptible to that in life. Anyways, I had a client who I allowed to come in because I see their partner. And so my client brought their partner in. And this person was not willing to, it basically felt like mandated therapy, which I do not do. And what I mean by that is, like, someone shows up and they're like, well, I'm physically here, aren't I? And they're not willing to be accountable or take responsibility for their impact on their partner or be curious about themselves. And so I have to say, I was surprised by my nervous system was jangled. at the end of that session. I felt, because I feel everything, I get a lot of information through my body about what people are feeling, and it's how I make interventions. But it was like the circuit board was shot. It was so lit up. It was hard to decipher whose is what's is. And I would try to make an intervention, but there was no, there was no way in. And I was just like, this is unpleasant. And I don't, you know what? I actually get to choose who I work with, and I don't want to do this, but the surprise for me was, I think it's like being a Democrat in a liberal state, and you are surprised when Trump wins the election. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, we have to wake up to the fact that, and you were saying something earlier that made me think of that, where there are a lot of psychotherapists that don't include the body at all, right? That's still, there's even the Wright Institute doesn't teach
No.
the body and trauma. That's not part of their curriculum. So that it felt like that. Like, I was like, wow, I haven't encountered this in a long time. And there are a lot of people out there who are not willing to take responsibility and to be accountable. And often I'm working with their partners. I'm not working with them because they don't come in, right? And my course, one of the things I say is like, who is this for, right? And that who is it not for? It's not willing. It's not for you if you're not willing to take responsibility for yourself, and you don't want to change the impact that you have on other people as a result of your automatic nervous system responses. So I just don't see those people as much anymore.
Mhm.
That was probably not where you imagined I would go with surprise,
No.
but
Good. It was a good surprise. I have another question.
yes, please.
Over the years, I have heard you say that one of the things, you use the word liberation.
Mm,
And I don't think that we've ever had a conversation about liberation. But when you're for helping people to be liberated,
Mm.
what are they being liberated from, or what are they being liberated to? Because it's a word that's used in racial areas and countries and history. Right now Ukraine, is going on. So and Gaza, there's liberation things happening. They're just in your world when you use that. I'd be interested in hearing a little about what that means to you, liberation.
Oh, it's so layered. I was writing the other day, and I was reflecting on my own nervous system and habits of like survival strategies that I've used. And one of them that I think actually has been with me probably before I existed in this lifetime. Right. One is it's being a commitment to being of service. Right. Charna, actually, even though it's Yiddish, I was named after my great grandmother. I was told by somebody who speaks Hindi and also, in Sanskrit. So I was born in Nepal. And so I end up in these conversations about the
Wow.
origin of my name, because people think it's actually a Hindi name. But it literally means like the dew at the feet of the gods, but basically being the translation of being of service to the gods. And that resonates for me in a deep way. I don't think my name is an accident. So being of service, but sometimes to my own detriment, like that can be something that you really need to put in check and learn how to have boundaries around, and learn how to not do compulsively. Right. And so I was thinking about being of service and my commitment to people's liberation. And liberation to me, it's as someone who didn't feel safe inside my physical body or safe inside the world, And so people get either really, really tight, they get really pulled back, or they leave their bodies, right? So to be liberated, it's like, how do you actually occupy? You can, instead of making yourself almost invisible inside your own shell of a body so that you're safe, how do you, taking bigger breath is the beginning, right? How do you expand fully into the edges of your body? How do you bring more oxygen and flow so that you can think clearly, that you can open your peripheral vision, that you can then connect from this place, you can connect out into relationships with life around you, right? So first it's like on a personal level, there's that. Then you have inside, you have like stretching your fascia with your breath, and then your thoughts. Like, what restriction exists inside the way you think about yourself and other people, and how you have to be lovable and to be worth, you know, to be a valuable human and have the right to exist. So many of us are, it's almost like I was watching a cult documentary. I have a bad habit of watching cult documentaries. And I think growing up in an abusive family or a culture that is hateful towards you because of your skin, because of your religion, because of your sexuality, um, you get brainwashed into believing hateful things about yourself. And it feels so true and so real. And you don't even realize that they're belief systems. And so helping people start to unwind that. So liberating it can relate to sex and sexuality. I ask people like, what's your, what is sexual freedom to you? What is embodied freedom to you? Like freedom from believing that we are dependent on other people for our well-being. Yes, we coexist in a family of things. We are pack animals, but we also can heal ourselves in profound ways. Certain amount of guidance, but then through meditation, through self-practice, right? Like we get to take more responsibility for our wellness, because I think people don't want us to have that, right? Just on a larger way of a systemic level, right? It's like I call meditation and a variety of other things anarchist medicine, because we can liberate ourselves and remember that we are much more powerful than we think we are.
Yes, thank you. I think meditation is often where, as you said, it can be on our breath, on tensions in our body, in our mind, but we're choosing where to place our attention. And a lot of the culture wants to choose for us where to place our attention. That's what advertising is and all this. So,
yeah.
Thank you. But I like that word liberation, and I want to use it more. So I'm glad. Thank you for your comments.
Thank you for asking. It's it's really heartbreaking when you look around the world and you look at the oppression and the genocide and the harm that is occurring. And there are things that we don't have, like we feel so powerless to make a difference in. And so, I think that the more that you are, and it's so hard. I mean, this is such a big, complex conversation. We could just do a topic about liberation. But the more that you liberate yourselves, then hopefully, at least in my experience, I felt so much more connected to the rest of the field and the people in it. And then you hopefully don't cause the same harm or want to cause that kind of harm, right? There's more consideration. So, act small forms of activism in that way, right? Obviously, we need to go beyond that, but It's like,
Mm.
stop scrolling. And, I mean, it's hard. It's like what you said in terms of even, you mentioned compression socks and then suddenly it's in your feed. And so, yes, your attention is constantly being pulled towards something that you can purchase or something to distract you. And I succumb to it. And sometimes I really enjoy it, right? We need a break from constantly being of service or whatever. But at the same time, it can become all that you do.
So I would guess that one way of looking at psychotherapy is, oh my God, I have to sit here with somebody for 50 minutes and listen to their whatever. But I think another way, what you just is you hear little breakthroughs and little changes, and you invite them.
Mm-hmm.
You see their breath changes a little, as you're saying, or they relax a bit in their body or their mind. So you get to see the results of liberation also in your work. Yeah, it's wonderful. I really like work that is about service of others. And as you said, it's not service of everyone indiscriminately. That's craziness. That's actually arrogance. We think we can do that with all kinds of people. But I think we need more people in the world who have that generosity to be there for others.
Agreed. And, I want us to the people that send me questions and ask me about this or that. And, I'd love for you to also share some resources that you might know about, because you have created a really important contribution, which is sexological bodywork. And I believe it was Body Electric School that you founded as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so that there's different resources out there for people that are wanting to help people increase their liberation around sex and sexuality. There's a lot, and we are both in the Bay Area, but sexological bodywork is all over the world. Locally, there's Somatica, if you're interested in that. There's the Strozzi Institute. There's Hakomi, which also works on with a somatic approach. There's Bodynamics, which is a piece of the work that I do and really love. So feel free to throw some in there, Joseph.
No, I think well, for me, I think anything somebody can do that brings them into their body, that's the first step. You have to be here now. So going for a walk, exercise, eating good food, laughing with friends. So just, being in your body. And as you say, scrolling or watching television or I actually feel we're getting more and more unhealthy in that way, that we are a disembodied people, that there's amazing things that happen through our phones. That's the thing. Amazing connections, and I can watch any movie I want somehow through my through the internet. I can listen to music. I could go out, but if all of that is if I'm forgetting myself, so I think the forgetting of our bodies. That's my work, and that's part of your work. Well, that's part of the work. You have to remember. It's remembering.
And I was specifically wondering if there are trainings that you know of that people could seek out. But then I also realized we didn't define somatics or embodiment. And so I would like to just take a moment to do that, so that, there are people out there that don't know what somatic means. And somatics, the living body in its wholeness is what it literally translates to your connection between your mind, body, spirit, and emotions. So your whole system, it's a very holistic approach rather than trying to separate the mind from the body. And which seems absurd, right? If you swim in that soup long enough, right? That we get the same neural pathways live in your body. You can rewire your brain through physical practices, not just thinking or reading about something, right? And so to embody yourself is to physically feel and be informed by the sensations that you can feel in all parts of your body. Because if you focus right now on your body, on your whole being, there might be places that are tight or loose or warm or cold. They might be completely blank. You might have a certain part of you that you feel more than everything else. And so to be able to have your physical experience and your sensations inform you and help you know maybe what your emotions are in this moment. If you don't know, if you asked yourself, what am I feeling? And you don't have an answer, but you know enough that when you're really hot in the face, that shame, or there's a tension in your belly and you identify that as anger, or a heaviness in your chest, and that's grief. So we can really get a lot of information about what feels good to us or what doesn't when we pay attention to our body and our body's signals. And that's really one of the values, rather than overly thinking everything.
Overly thinking. I asked somebody once, so how can you tell? I was in a class, I think, and I said, how can I tell if I've really learned something? And this person said, well, the less you think, the more you've learned. And I go, that doesn't sound it. I was really thrown. I remember it, but I didn't believe it at the time. But it's not to put down thinking. We both went to graduate school. I've spent, unfortunately, most of academia is about thinking, but it's really important to feel, to remember the body, to notice, noticing. And I like to go further, savor, not just to feel, but to savor. Even if it's sadness, even if it's, that pain, well, if it's going to be there, I might as well kind of enjoy it. And so savor.
And be appreciative, right? There's a lot of trying to get away from ourselves, getting away from pain, getting away from felt experience if we deem it not likable, when it's actually a really important voice for us to listen to. It's communicating something.
There's two main reasons that I personally, and in my work, find paying attention to my body important. One is health. Is all kinds of things start, and you can feel them, little tiny things start inside in your body. You notice it, and you just put it aside, or you don't notice it, and you don't notice it for years. My father had a very serious thing that he didn't pay attention to for 3 years. And I go, oh, I'm in that. I mean, I've learned. I'm a chip off the old block. Pay attention. So there's health things that we can pay attention to. As simple as, I ate this and it doesn't feel good. Eating this doesn't make me feel good. Eating this makes me feel good. Not feeling good on the tongue like sugar sometimes does, or ice cream, but makes you feel good in your whole body a half hour later. Oh, eating that really made me feel good. So one reason to feel is the health. And the other is, more and more, this is how I make decisions. You said gut, you pay attention to your gut. About when you're talking about clients who are crossing boundaries, or it's our gut tells us all kinds of stuff if we pay attention, notice. So I I think more and more I make decisions by, it's not like thinking, should I do this or this? It's like being with something saying, oh yeah, I think yes.
Mm-hmm.
But it's paying attention to the body. So it's the body.
Yeah. And I want to add one other piece. I didn't really talk about this, but I'll just throw it in there because it is a energy medicine school, right? There's places like Berkeley Psychic Horizons, or Psychic Horizons is where I went in San Francisco, but there's the Berkeley Psychic Institute. And so that's the body, but it's our energy systems, right? Working with the chakras, working with the energy that we take on from other people, and we may not have any awareness that it's there, that we are the storage locker for our ancestors and for all the people that we've met over the last 30 years, for energy that's been dumped. And that's a whole other topic for another day, but it was a huge piece of healing for me, healing chronic fatigue and getting in for like how I work with clients and the information that I receive. And so that's another thing for people. I've referred clients over the years to go do their own work there because I guide people through visualizations and meditations. And that's been really big for them. So, I just want to say that not everything it's not going to be the same path for everybody. And you really need to be guided by your own spirit. One of the things that I really relate to you, Joseph, with is, like, as you said, being of service, and that you have a history of connection. You may call it spirit, you may call it God. You're much more traditionally religious than I was, but that there's awareness of something bigger, and that your spirit is guiding you to something, like you were guided to be of service through that work. And so, I think that I can give people logistical pieces of information and guidance, but ultimately they need to be in their own practices to listen deeply inside themselves
Yes.
for what the next step is, right? And I'm gifted with being connected to my gut, and that's a resource for me. And so, but that's not everybody's reality, right? We all have different strengths. And so we have to figure out how to listen to our own bodies in different ways.
Well said. Many paths of liberation. Find yours.
Mm-hmm.
Many paths.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you so much.
It's been a delight.
Thank you for joining us. If you appreciated this episode, my online course, Pathways to Peace, Mindful Practices for Transformative and Vibrant Living, is open for ongoing enrollment. This means you can sign up at any time. It's a self-paced course to make it manageable with your schedule. And as for the coursework, you'll receive 4 weeks worth of daily videos where I teach you how to understand your nervous system and its reactions, how to think more clearly and gain perspective, how to transform the ways your body communicates through physical sensations, how to identify emotions, where they come from and what they're telling you, how to discover why you react in ways that produce shame and learn tools to manage these reactions, how to reduce your anxiety and destructive impulses, and how to diminish self-hatred when you are not your best self. You can also sign up for weekly group coaching calls where you'll have direct contact with me and I'll answer any of your questions. If you want to learn more before then, and hope you do, you can go to my course page, courses.Charna Cassell. That's CharnaCassell.com for more information. So if you appreciated this episode, please like, rate, and review it and share it with your friends. If you'd like to stay connected, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at LaidOPEN Podcast. As well as if you go to CharnaCassell.com, you can join my newsletter where you can get information about upcoming courses I'll be offering, and I do free giveaways. Plus, you'll get discounts as well as resources that I share. At passionatelife.org, you can get more information about my private practice and the kind of work that I do. This has been LaidOPEN Podcast with your host, Charna Cassell. We all have different capacities, but I believe in our capacity to grow and change together. Until next time.